we just say, no, it hasn't been proven yet, so we're not going to buy into it, rather than saying, well, hang on a second, this person is saying that it works, and this person is saying that it works, and this person is saying that it works, and this person is saying, well, if you tinker with it and alter it slightly, then it works, slightly different.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harmonia Podcast. Today, we are joined by somebody across the pond, Julie Fry, who we love to refer to as the potion mistress?
Potion mistress, chief alchemist, witch chef, high-tech witch, what have you. Some of my more formal titles are scientific director, chief research officer, but they're not as fun. So.
Oh, bless you. But you know what? We will go into that though. So I'm going to hand over to you, Julie, to do a more formal introduction, and then we'll get into it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast today, Berta. I really appreciate this opportunity. So I play a lot of different roles. Some of them are, I'm a president and co-founder of a nonprofit called LERN Herstory, as opposed to history, which we've learned throughout time, well, throughout our most recent times. So as a complement to that, I believe we should learn herstory. And I am also the co-owner and scientific director of a cafe, bed and breakfast, and retreat space here in Jamaica. And I am also chief research officer for a company called Cannabiscienza, based out of Italy. I do several other odds and bits and odds and stuff, whatnot, on the side. Data collection. I do education on psilocybin containing mushrooms across the island for retail outlets. So I guess you could call me a fungi fanatic, a fungi fanatic educator, and fungi facilitator. I don't know. I haven't thought about that one a lot. And yeah, just other. I play other roles as well. So I try to do what I can where I can to reduce harm in the face of propaganda, of legal rhetorical propaganda that has caused more harm than it's reduced. So.
Wow, first of all, that is just so amazing, all of the work that you do. And I think I have previously said this to you. I don't know where you find the strength. My nickname for you is Miss Wonder Woman.
Wow, thank you. That's a huge compliment. Thank you so much. I feel so much gratitude for that, because sometimes I feel like we all, every day, when we get up and we are driven by this passion that motivates us to continue doing this work, and in the face of 5 billion obstacles and more that are created every day, you can feel kind of like you have to be a superhero sometimes, like just getting up and getting out and going on and doing it all over again. But as I did mention to you, I think part of the reason why I still have the energy and I'm still fueled to do this work is I am uncompromising on getting my sleep in. So, a lot of people still are, but we got to remember, people are programmed to think like, oh, if you sleep, you're lazy. No. We need sleep. We have to be uncompromising on it, because it is part of our lifestyle and part of what contributes to our ability to operate, excuse me, at our peak optimization, or optimally at our peak levels. There we go. Let me put it that way. So I'm uncompromising when it comes to my sleep, and I truly believe that that's where I continue to find enough energy to play some of these parts. Yeah.
No, I mean, like you mentioned, sleep is something that is very, very important. I fully agree with you as well. I know for myself, when I do get a very good night's sleep, I generally tend to feel a lot better the next day, and I have a lot more symptom relief. It does make a huge difference. Speaking of, I suppose, symptoms and managing them, what sort of like started your journey with medical cannabis?
That is a great question, and I love telling. This is part of the reason why I co-founded Learn Herstory, is because I wanted we women to share our stories, how we came here, because I find that so many women are in this space because their lives or the lives of someone dear to them were saved by cannabis. And for me, it's no different. Cannabis saved my life hands down and continues to save my life every single day. Um, when I was 13 years old, I lost my mother and I was left with my father, who didn't quite know how to relate to a 13-year-old girl. And sorry, Jamaica. um, and and it was, yeah, with the background ambient noise. Yeah, so sorry, there's going to be horns blaring and probably some music coming in at some time. Sorry about that. um but yeah, so anyhow, so when I went through that experience, I didn't know how to deal with the grief I was feeling, and it manifested in the form of eating disorders and suicidal ideations. By the time I reached 17 years old, I made a suicide attempt, and I was at a really low point in my life. And at 18 years old, I discovered cannabis. And at the time, I didn't view it as being medically significant or of having therapeutic value, because I had in, internalized the anti-drug campaign propaganda, and so thought, oh gosh, this is a drug, it's an illicit substance. Um, I'm a rebel kind of thing, and but I'm going to do it anyway because getting high is fun. Um, Little did I know that getting high is also therapeutically valuable, right? So, and was valuable to me in invaluable to me, let's say invaluable to me as well, in that um, it helped me to recognize the value of my own life and my own existence. And eventually, one day, I woke up after having passed out at the toilet. I was bulimic at that point, so I had binged and purged and put my system through such an exhaustive process that I lost consciousness, and I passed out. Yeah, I passed out in the bathroom, and I remember looking up at the ceiling and saying, "This isn't the way." And that I don't care if I gain 50 pounds, 100 pounds, if I have to go through that process to get myself back into a healthy state of being, that I would do whatever it took. And I don't think that I would have reached that epiphany were I to not have been taking cannabis for the entire year prior. I don't think it would have changed my brain to be able to even have that realization. And I also, at that point, started to get into edibles. So consuming cannabis orally rather than inhalate through inhalation or smoking. And I think that that was a huge change that was also facilitated by cannabis too, right? Because at the time, I was playing collegiate soccer, collegiate level football, soccer, whatever you want to call it in your part of the world. Um, and it was not conducive to my lifestyle to be smoking. So I think that cannabis really facilitated all of these changes in perspective that helped me take a different or have a reframe on my lifestyle and make changes that facilitated a healthier lifestyle. And I really don't think I would have come to those conclusions without the help of cannabis. So it saved my life, continues to save my life, and psilocybin containing mushrooms have only added layers to that overall healthcare uh, regime, I guess you could say, or regimen.
Wow, Julie, first of all, can I just say thank you so much for sharing that with us? I know how difficult it can be to have to open up, and I really appreciate you opening up so much and honestly about it. I think one of the things that a lot of people generally tend to forget when it comes to sort of like cannabis based medical products, one of the reasons why it helped you look at things from a different perspective is cannabis has this ability to um, allow you to see your situation from a different perspective. And that's why a lot of the time it's used for psychiatry. Now, I did have a doctor on here in one of the more previous episodes explain it, so I'm not going to bother going into that. But it's interesting how you, as a patient, are now explaining exactly what she has said, which is it enabled you to see your life from a different perspective and realize that actually a lot of the choices that I'm making now, they really do need to change because they're not for the benefit of my health and well being. And it's sort of like, from what I hear, enabled you to sort of empower yourself to make these sort of like positive decision and decide, you know what, I'm now going to do things a little bit more, but it sounds of it holistically as well, like appropriately and holistically.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I always maintain that these plant medicines, they facilitate our own bodies or systems or spirits ability to heal ourselves. We are self-healing beings. All of us are capable. We just need some catalysts sometimes, and they can act as catalysts for us to facilitate the healing, but not, they don't do the work for us. We still have to do the work. So yeah.
And I love what you said. They don't do the work for us. So anybody who watches this podcast knows that I am constantly saying that we still have to put the work in. I know that when people have gone through a very, a struggle, basically, by the time they find the medication that works for them, they no longer want to put any more work in. They're like, oh, I'm done, I'm free now. Where it's like, actually, it helps you get to the point where you should be able to now push yourself to do the work, because by doing the work, you are allowing yourself to get so much better than you were when you first started taking it, if that makes any sense.
Oh, 100%. That makes total sense. So I like to help people visualize this a little bit sometimes. And I use this analogy specifically when I'm talking about psilocybin containing mushrooms, but this really goes for just about anything that you include in your holistic healthcare. Um, Imagine that you've been in some kind of combat situation, which is like, that can be um, used as a metaphor for really any kind of traumatic event. Any kind of traumatic event that you incur in your life, that you encounter in your life, is going to be like a combat situation. And when you get out of that combat situation, you're going to have pieces of shrapnel stuck in you, right? Now, they might not be visible. In mental health care, they're generally not visible, but we all know that the body keeps score and that the mental and the physical are connected, right? So if you've got these pieces of shrapnel in you, how are you going to heal until you actually face the shrapnel and say, oh shit, maybe I should pull this out? Otherwise, the wound can't heal. So you've got to go through the pain in order to heal the whole wound, right? We have to take the shrapnel out, but we can't do that until we face the shrapnel and we say, okay, fine, I see you, you're here, I see the shrapnel, I'm going to pull it out. But that's painful. That can be painful, especially if it's stuck in deep, right? Maybe it's in your bone. You got to pull that piece of shrapnel out. That's going to be painful. It's going to be a painful process, but we got to go through the pain to process it and let it go.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Go through the pain to process it and let it go. You have no idea how many times I say this to, when I work in the mental health sector, I say this to patients often, is that you can't just get over something. I think a lot of the time people are looking for a magic wand, and there is no magic wand. We are the magic wand we are looking for, and we need to just go, whoop, undo the work ourselves, no matter how hard it is, no matter how painful it is. It's so important that we don't neglect that side of things, because, well, for starters, you're not building any resilience when you're neglecting that side of things, which means if anything were to happen to you in the future, you now are right back to square one again, struggling because you haven't really built any resilience to enable you to actually be able to overcome that situation should it happen again. But without going way too into mental health, because I just get lost in mental health if I start talking, I definitely just want to recognize, or I want people to recognize the importance of still putting in the work. And I know for yourself, speaking of putting in the work, I know for yourself, you have a very nice, lovely, safe space where people can come down and put in the work. Would you like to explore that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So, actually, this is a perfect segue, right? Because you, like I mentioned, you're in a combat zone when you're in these traumatic situations, and you are going to have a much more challenging time healing when you're in the middle of combat, rather than being able to come to a safe space where you can, because right during the wound healing process, whether it's mental or physical or both, or whether you visual however you visualize that process going, right, when you pull out that piece of shrapnel, you're going to have a gaping open wound. It's going to be hard for you to heal if you don't have the space to be vulnerable, to have that gaping open wound, to be able to sit back and give yourself that 2 weeks for the wound healing process to actually let it heal. If you have to go back into combat and you keep, taking fire, there's just going to be more and more healing that your body's going to have to go through, and it's going to compound the process, and it's going to make it that much more difficult to get to that place of healing. And you're going to have to keep healing from new wounds and new wounds, and your body's going to have to keep signaling that there's inflammation going on, and oh my gosh, you got a new site for a wound that you've got to heal. It's going to make it that much more challenging. So the that's the significance and the importance of creating safe spaces for people to come to facilitate this process. That's why this is called the Stoner Sanctuary, because it's a sanctuary for stoners, a sanctuary for people who want to take cannabis and take psilocybin containing mushrooms and really any other. The great thing about Jamaica is that all psychedelics are legal, all entheogens and entactogens are legal. So if you want to come here and work with any of the plant medicines, whether it's ayahuasca, San Pedro, peyote, psilocybin containing mushrooms, Syrian rue, what have you, the opportunities are here for the most part, which is, in my opinion, the best thing ever, because there are specific plants that are going to speak to you. They have their ways of communicating with us too. And if something is calling you and you're being called to it, because there's the push-pull in the universe that never goes one way, that is your medicine, and it's calling you, even if you don't recognize it as such. So, and I totally understand you don't want to get fixated on the mental health aspect of this, but it's all connected. As I mentioned before, we've got the HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that connects the gut and the brain, and not only is this significant, but it's also it is also interconnected in a way that it can't be unentangled. We can't disentangle it. We have to consider our mental health when considering our physiological health, and vice versa. And in my opinion, since everything starts with energy, and energy exists in the spiritual realm and the metaphysical realm before we even get to the material realm, we have to take into consideration that it comes from spirit. And these plant medicines help us get in touch with spirit, because a lot of these things that are manifesting in our body in physical form are starting there. A lot, if not all. So it is a holistic view. It is a holistic view of health. It is taking into consideration the spiritual, the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the environmental, because we're systems inside of systems. And this is why I really get frustrated when we're talking about the orthodox medical care system, because they're talking about isolated compounds. And it's not as simplistic as that. You can't use something that's an isolated thing to treat a system. You have to use a system to to treat a system, in my opinion.
No, I fully agree with you. I mean, I've personally said here on the podcast as well that it's really, really important to have a full spectrum medication. I know that different people respond differently to different types of medication, and you should really allow yourself to experience a lot of different things. One of the things in the UK that is a bit of a challenge is often people associate THC levels with I don't know, the best medication type. Whereas THC, yes, it's great for managing severe pain. However, in my case, where I have so many symptoms, I can use THC for pain. But if I'm really swollen and I have inflammation, THC does absolutely nothing for me. I need something that is full CBD. So it's really important to understand that different parts of the plant do different things for the body, and that's what, in my opinion anyways, that's why a full spectrum sort of like let's call it approach would be a lot better for people. But again, I think a lot of people it's a hot topic here, let's put it like that.
Well, here's the thing, and this kind of goes back to the UK's model, healthcare model, and I'm relating it back to this because I want to point out some disparities in how different peoples view medicines around the world. It's challenging for people who've been trained in Orthodox medicine to wrap their minds around using healthcare tools that have not been their uses, the uses of which, or the components of which, have not been clearly defined in terms of cause and effect using current peer-reviewed scientific literature. But the problem with this approach is that it's almost impossible to take a plant that has 400 to 500 different molecules in it and account for all of those confounding variables in terms of how they affect the effects of that medicine. So it's challenging for people who have been brought up with that model to relate or to understand the benefits of a whole plant extract or a full spectrum perspective, how that can possibly be better than something that's clearly defined. However, I mean, and again, and so this kind of goes back to what I talk about a lot on the LERN Herstory platform, which is that the model of healthcare that we have adopted in the Western world right now stems from a patriarchal perspective, which there's nothing wrong with the way that male brains view the world. But what they tend to do is they tend to want to break it apart into pieces that they can compartmentalize and box in and say, okay, this does this, and this does this, and this does this. And female brains don't work the same way. And healthcare prior to 1000 AD was more holistic. We looked at things, and I'm talking about 1000 AD. I peg that time, that era of time, specifically because that's when medicine started to become institutionalized, and institutions primarily excluded women from the healthcare system and practicing healthcare in the ways that they knew how. And I'm not saying that only women did it this way then. I'm just saying it was primarily a women's approach, which is polypharmacological. And I'm not talking about 7 or 8 different molecules. I'm talking about hundreds of different molecules and various different plant combinations to treat various different ailments in different individuals. Because as you mentioned before, different individuals are going to need different tones of molecules and molecular components. So the approach with the female brain, even if we can't understand each individual little tiny component, takes on a more intuitive approach. We might not be able to explain it, but we can feel our way through it intuitively. And intuition is something that males can't necessarily relate to. They have instincts, but not necessarily intuition. Whereas women, we are heavy on the intuition. So even if we can't explain it, we know it. We have a feeling deep inside us of knowing. And that's almost impossible to relate to unless you live it. So, and our current healthcare model in the Western world is patriarchal predominantly, and that means that um, when we can't explain it, we veer away from it rather than um, leaning into it and wondering why, or wondering what if, and looking for the anecdotal empirical evidence. Um, we just say, no, it hasn't been proven yet, so we're not going to buy into it. Rather than saying, well, hang on a second, this person is saying that it works, and this person is saying that it works, and this person is saying that it works, and this person is saying, well, if you tinker with it and alter it slightly, then it works, slightly different. And this individual had a totally different response than this individual, and let's investigate that. So rather than taking that approach, which I see is happening right now, we're having the psychedelic renaissance happening right now. The indigenous people are calling this the era of the age of remembrance, because we're coming out of the age of forgetting. We are remembering who we are. We are returning to those roles, and we are returning to our intuition and our higher selves, and remembering that it is something greater that guides us, and taking our power back. So, which is shaping healthcare in a totally I don't want to say new way, because again, we're coming back to ourselves. So we're remembering how we did it, and we're coming back to that. So it's not new. We're just remembering how we did it before, and remembering that those approaches worked, and investigating them now with the new tools that we have at our disposal in the research community and then the scientific community. And that's a beautiful thing, because science is continuing to catch up with intuition. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So
No, that's amazing. And actually, you made me think about. No, it did. It did. It did. You made me think about a few things, actually. I mean, when you were talking about the different components of the medication and altering it just slightly can have a different effect. And I don't know why, it just made me think about string theory. It just made me think about string theory because, okay, so like, I suppose medical cannabis or medicine or in general, no, I'm going to say like medical cannabis, right? We don't know what everything does, right? And yes, there is propaganda, there's all of these things that definitely contributed to it. But at the same time, I like to see it in the sense that people look at it as this odd thing. Anyways, here in the UK, they do. I do apologize. My brain fog is kicking in, and I have so many things going on in my brain that I'm trying to explain right now, and I can even feel my brain being so heavy. So, excuse me, people. Well, today is not my day. So, what I'm just trying to say in general is that I love the fact that when you change, no, I love the fact that it's really important for us to understand that, yes, having even the smallest bit of change can have a huge impact. And if you look at it in like string theory, for anyone that believes in that, just the way that the strings vibrate creates a whole different universe. And the string can vibrate in millions of ways, which means that there is like millions of universes out there. And it's the same when you look at it in medical cannabis and the strains and the components and stuff. There are so many different aspects. Sorry, do you know what? I can't. My brain is done. But I think you're nodding your head, so I have a feeling you know what I'm trying to say.
absolutely, no, right on point. There's really infinite possibilities. That's the beautiful thing with systems and true polypharmacology. There's infinite possibilities. And yes, 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 100%. I'm right there with you, because
Thank you very much.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, 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 no. To be honest with you, you are explaining it so much better than I am. I am definitely going to leave it to you. My brain is not happening today. So long as you got the point that I was trying to make, I'll leave you to it.
Well, I mean, it's challenging. We're in different time zones. I'm not really a morning person, so my brain is like more mentally challenged in the mornings, and in yours that is more taxed in the evening. So it's so funny, because we're just going to have to come together to be one whole human at this point. Um, but no, I like to look at us as biocrystals, right? So if at the very and I love that you, oh, we're getting a bit of a connection. Okay, there we go. I love how you brought up string theory, because I've talked a lot about how ultimately everything comes down to points, lines, and the space in between, which is right there with string theory, right? And if that's the case, then, right, on the very most fundamental level, on the atomic level, we are points, lines, and the space in between, which means that essentially we are not only holographic or holograms, but we are biocrystals. So on our most fundamental molecular structure, we are crystals, and we take different shapes and forms from moment to moment to moment to moment, because the molecular processes going on inside of our bodies happen in fractions of seconds, not even, milliseconds, nanoseconds, faster than that, faster than that. So we're constantly changing our molecular structure, which means that we're constantly changing our vibrational frequency, and means that everything that we take in, whether palpable or impalpable, physical or non-physical, is changing the way that we resonate and show up in the world. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. And it means that there's infinite possibilities, and infinite possibilities for changing the way that we vibrate and resonate. And yeah, it's exciting.
I think that that is the best place to leave it at. Julie, thank you so much. Yeah, before my brain gets any more fried, oh dear God, it's literally starting to go. I can feel the slurred speech coming on. But Julie, thank you so much for joining us. And you know what? It's been so fascinating speaking to you. And I really hope that a lot of people will take on board some of your feedback. But just to sort of round things up, what would your advice be to, I suppose, the UK market? Because I know you're quite familiar with, I guess, globally. I can't talk anymore. What would your advice be?
No, I got you. I got you. Yeah, okay. So, my advice, my number one piece of advice to the UK market legislative bodies is make sure that your citizens have safe avenues uh, for not only for the entirety of the supply chain for cannabis. Make sure that they have safe avenues. Make sure that there's accountability in the supply chain. And the only way that you can do that is to legitimize and liberate this plant. So you have to do it. You have to. You have to give patients safe outlets, so safe spaces in which to experience this plant. You have to give them safe outlets in which to acquire and obtain it. You have to make sure that education is widely available, and not only for the people who are cultivating, processing, and distributing, but also for the consumers and the customers themselves, and the medical practitioners who are going to also be distributing. And you have to make sure that you give the cultivators safe um, safe recourse for cultivating and creating these products. Everything has to be legitimized. It has to be legitimized from start to finish. Otherwise, there's no accountability. And if you can't rely on any specific point in the supply chain, if there is any kind of corruption in the supply chain, then you can't guarantee the safety of the patient. And if that is truly what's of the utmost importance to you, UK, then you have to make sure the entire supply chain is held accountable, is legitimized, and is lightly regulated. Okay, do not overregulate. You do not want to price your customers out of the market, because then they're going to turn to the underground markets. Just look at Canada and look at California as models for that. Okay, please, please, please.
Julie, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on here today. For anybody who is interested in, Julie does a lot of amazing work within the industry, and all of her links will be available in the description section of this podcast. Julie, thank you so much for coming on here today. It was honestly, I just feel like I do apologize. My brain is just not having it today, but thank you so much. I feel I've definitely learned a lot myself as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Berta, for having me. I can't thank you enough. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for listening and your time and attention. Bye.
No worries. We look forward to seeing everybody back for the specials, and have a good evening. Bye.